All right, guys, we have a guest I'm really excited to talk to. Dylan Ratigan, been a long time, someone I have admired for a very long time. To me, one of the smartest and most astute observers of our economy, of the global economy, financial markets. One and only Dylan Ratigan to talk to us about what is going on in China. Dylan, we wanted to have you on to talk about what do you see happening in China right now? I tried my best and Saagar tried our best to sort of break down what's going on with Evergrande. For people who don't know, it's this giant real estate development company in China. Of course, the housing market extraordinarily important in China, something like 30% of the GDP. That's on the verge of collapse right now. It's been called potentially China's Lehman Brothers moment, questions of whether or not the Chinese Communist Party is going to ultimately bail them out. Break down what you see as happening there and, any insights into what sort of impact this may have both in China and around the world.
Yeah. I think that you have to start anytime you're going to have a conversation worth having around anything like this. You think you have to understand the motivations and what the underlying dynamic at the tippy top, which is obviously the Chinese economy is the primary economic rival to the United States economy. Obviously, China is the primary geopolitical rival for influence in the world outside of its own boundaries. China has done a remarkable job of prosecuting as the primary political or geopolitical, opponent to the United States, particularly the last 15 or 20 years, and not the least of which has been, at the core of that has been building, right? Whether it's bridges, infrastructure, trains, at the apex of which is their Belt and Road Initiative, which is fundamentally their economic plan to take over the earth, right? It's a mechanism of wiring all the ports and trade points and all these things as a way to have economic control of the earth.
Dylan, yeah, go ahead.
I'll be quick and I'm all ears. That same principles at work internally in China. We're going to move people from rural China to urban China, and in anticipation of that, we're going to do a few things. One, we're going to build huge cities. That's what this company does. We're going to pre-sell all those. If you say, there are cities in China that have 15 million people that no one's ever heard of. Yes, there are, and this is one of the main companies that was doing that building and was running the financial flows wherever you invest or lend money to this real estate company, and that's why they talk about, is this Lehman? What is this? Because it's wired. It was so successful, and because of poor infrastructure development, whether it's a foreign policy, Belt and Road, or domestic policy, Evergrande, right, or as a proxy for internal construction, and what's come up now is the same thing that comes up always is when you have a central banking system, whether it's the U.S. central bank funding credit default swaps for the mortgage market in the United States in 2005, 4, 5, 6, 7, or whether it's the Chinese central bank putting liquidity in the markets to support lending and the debt creation around a story that everybody believes, whether it's the story of the U.S. housing market, or in this case, the story of the urban housing development in China. All you're seeing is the natural consequence of that level of basically de-risking. When people perceive that there's just easy money, right? If you lend money into the real estate infrastructure, the development, imagine if I came to you guys, I said, listen, give me some money, you'll own, Chinese government-backed real estate. It pays 100%, it pays, right? And so now what's come up with Evergrande is maybe it doesn't pay. Maybe there's a miscalculation on how much money is going to come in relative to how much money is going to come out, because their occupancy rates aren't the same, the pricing, all the things that always happen whenever real estate gets upside down or starts to break down. And it brings up then the question, which is, what will China, I don't know, brings up a bunch of questions. I'll stop and listen to them.
Sure. Dylan, this is really what I'm trying to point. You were very prescient in predicting the housing crisis. What are the follow-on effects that we could expect to see here in the United States as a result of all of this Chinese maneuvering?
Really good for the United States. Honestly, there's a perception of China as this incredibly potent and powerful and dominating economic entity, if only because of its size and because of its dictatorship, which allows directed budgeting towards, we're going to make high-speed trains. There's no debate with some Democrat or whatever. Like, it's ridiculous. They're like, no, we're making the train, okay? And so there's a value proposition that is in that, but with that top-down, centralized, highly controlled environment also comes a raft of fragility that is not as well perceived. And the number one asset we have in the United States is our flexibility. So we have the impairment of a central government that is really not capable of organizing a large directed undertaking of any kind, as we can all see. That's also to our advantage in that we have by far the best developed private capital markets on the planet Earth. The United States is the center of gravity for private capital. And the more China behaves like this, there's no threat, right? And so in other words, one, China's behavior confirms the United States position as the center of liquidity and capital for the world in the trillions. And two, it empowers U.S. flexibility. In other words, as long as we're asleep taking whatever China's dealing us out, whether it's pharmaceutical components, whether it's medical device components, whether it's all the supply chain issues that people like Matt Stoller talk about, when China shows its fragility or its instability politically or otherwise or economically, it's a catalyst for more flexible, dynamic investment in the United States to adapt to that, which is something that's great for the United States. It also confirms our capital market, and it exposes that, we like to talk about all of our political issues, of which we have an abundance thereof. So does China. And that the question is not, we're not, and so I think that this is evidence of that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So some, as I referenced, have called this potentially China's Lehman moment. How big of a deal is it actually for them? And do you see those parallels to the U.S. housing crisis?
For sure, the parallel is identical, right? In terms of understanding the imperial, imagine you're in a business school class and you're like, what happens when the central bank provides trillions of dollars in lending ability to a banking apparatus that lends money to build things, right? Whether it's houses in California or apartment towers in an unnamed city in China. And both situations is identical. You had cheap money from the Federal Reserve, funding into the mortgage lending market, funding into the ninja loans, blah, blah, U.S. housing crisis. Same here. You have the Central Bank of China funding into the lending markets to support infinite pools of capital that goes into the financing of this housing. And for sure, it's possible there's so much risk in this, as there was with Lehman Brothers, because they've got 200 other every other pension fund. Everybody's invested with these guys, right? That's what happened. The Lehman was Lehman not because of Lehman, but because every other pension, every other bank, every other life insurance policy was all invested in the same economics of the mortgage market in terms of those yields, and that's what's going on over there. The Chinese central bank will have to make a determination when they have enough information as to how they're going to resolve it. They'll resolve it in a way that ensures stability. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Maybe China will be more likely to identify executives and prosecute them and maybe even, incarcerate or whatever, do what China does to people that they don't like to them, which the United States did not do. So in that sense, it's exactly the same thing, just a different manifestation. I think that it's delusional to think that if there's a really, 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 really big problem with it, that the central banks are not going to do something about it any more than Germany was not going to bail out Greece or the U.S. was not going to bail out AIG. It's just a matter of I don't know how big it'll ultimately be. It's sensational for the headlines, and it's evidence of bad math in China, which every country has bad math. It's just a matter of how extreme it gets and when it gets revealed. And in this case, they went off to an extreme, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the question that everybody has, which is that will the Chinese even allow it to spiral as out of control? Or do you think that those internal kind of Chinese politics make it so that it's difficult for them to try and do what needs to be done if they were trying to quash it all right now?
I think it's unfair to say to China that they have some unique no one did it. I mean, everybody was. Where was President Bush? Where was Hank Paulson? Where was Barack Obama? Where was Angela Merkel? So we're going to look at the Chinese like, oh, are you going to be a communist and bail out all the banks? I mean, this is the irony of a bunch of Europeans and Americans laughing at China because they bail out their banks on a real estate crisis would be too rich. So I would say for sure they'll do it. If they need to, as much as Germany or the United States would do it. But I think what we're missing is the American China has appeared to be invincible, and their momentum has been profound for at least the past 20 years. There's a fatalistic set of research when you look at the research at Goldman. They're like by the 2050, China, there's an inevitability to China's dominance. just a matter of time, just on numbers. And whether it's the political behavior of the Chinese government relative to the tech companies, specifically Jack Ma, taking them all down, you're out. You're not the big guy in China. I'm the big guy in China, and I don't care. Imagine if the president did that to Bezos here, or Zucker. That's a signal to the world.
Yep.
So you're telling me that the same guy who's going to demote Jack Ma is not going to stabilize his real estate market domestically? It's preposterous. Mm-hmm. The point is, American opportunity abounds right now in the opportunity to return levels of advanced manufacturing and components of supply chain, especially critical supply chain, onshore, using a technology in a way that the window would never exist if China was humming, because it's like a narcotic. It works so well, it's priced so well, but because the ports are messed up, because the containers are expensive, because all the intermodal global movement of objects is a mess and will remain a mess for a long time now, and because the technology allows adaptive reality, whether it's resource efficiency, labor efficiency, all the things. And so I actually believe that this is a massive opportunity for the United States, both on the industrial and manufacturing side, but more importantly, in solidifying our primacy as the most powerful capital market in the world. Because the risk was, the capital is going to start to move to China, IPOs are going to move to Shanghai, Well, guess what? London, they did Brexit, so they're out. Hong Kong is over. China was your only threat. Tokyo's your friend. And if you don't speak Japanese, you can't do deals in Tokyo anyway, because they like to do Japanese language all the time. Now China's upside down. I think the United States needs to seize the momentum and go, honestly.
And so helpful, Dylan. The last question I have for you is, what are the costs to them ultimately bailing out Evergrande? And I don't mean the financial costs. I mean, they're trying to impose they're trying to deleverage their real estate markets. They don't like the idea, just like, our concept here of communicating, hey guys, take on whatever risk you want, because ultimately we're going to backstop you and you're too big to fail. So talk about those sort of pressures that operate in the other direction, even though I think that you're correct, that ultimately if it needs to be done, they're going to do it.
That has to be that's a political meeting, right? That's the meeting with Hank Paulson and Geithner and all. And your question is, as they run down the list of payables, we'll call it, right? Let's say they have 100 entities, retirees, old teachers, billionaire hedge funds, and everybody in between that have some take on whatever that yield of that whole daisy chain of all those pensions and bonds and real estate in the gajillions, trillions, right, at Evergrande. And the meeting is, who are we not going to pay? Or who's going to get a bill? Mm-hmm. Right? And now one option is, well, no one gets a bill, we pay everything. And then the question if we pay everything, what is the social consequence of that? Because there's a bunch of people that paid themselves hundreds of millions of dollars in personal income over the past 5 years on the promise that this was going to perform. And now it's not performing, but they've already paid themselves, which is why this thing that's what happened on Wall Street. They pay themselves on the promise of a future outcome, and then the future outcome never happens, but they keep the money that they paid themselves. That's moral hazard, right? And so to answer your question, Krystal, I believe that they will solve it in the way that they believe is the most politically favorable for the government in Beijing. And that I think they'll try to really puncture some wealthy individuals. Like there's somebody at Evergrande who already the Chinese government doesn't like, or the situation wouldn't exist. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like guarantee you there's a personal relationship somewhere behind all of this, which was before this went public, before it was being talked about on Breaking Points, and it was in the Wall Street Journal and everywhere, where they say, you know what, I don't like what you've been doing, and I'm going to feed you to the dogs.
That makes sense.
So that was we're already into something here. The fact that we're even talking about it. And so the resolution will be to continue to inflict pain on whoever that counterparty is. That obviously there's somebody that they want to suffer, or some group. And then they'll mitigate politically wherever they have to. I mean, they're much better. I mean, the United States is sending money directly. I mean, the government the Chinese are not afraid to send checks as much as anybody. And so answer to your question, Krystal, is what is in the political interest of Beijing? That's the only question. And obviously, one thing that's in his interest is the elimination of whoever this character or these characters at Evergrande are, because he's taking them off the board. Same way he took Jack Ma off the board. And he has a reason, and this is not some out of control situation. No way.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Right. Well,
But
I mean,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
You're foolish to be running around with your hair on fire like, oh, we're going to have a credit crisis. What if they don't pay? Blah, 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 as if there's some out of control securities market situation. And you're like, I don't know what the yields are going to do. You're like, he's doing what he wants to do. And he's showing us how he functions. First Jack Ma, now he's tabling Evergrande. He'll take more, I'm sure. You know, Putin puts people in jail. Khodorkovsky's like, you're out. The Chinese, they humiliate and eliminate. Right, and if they have to, whatever, you know, and so every country has its own mechanism. My point is, this is hugely positive for the United States, and it should be taken as a positive, in a collaborative and positive way.
Interesting. Dylan, thank you, my friend. Great to see you. Great to have your insights.
Great analysis, man. Thanks.
Greetings from heaven.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We've been trying to drive this home, but it continues to keep coming after us. We see YouTube demonetization across the board on anything that we deem subject. I am thinking, what do you predict today, Krystal?
God.
I think the Fed segment, FBI informants.
Possibly
Assange is also definitely up there. We rely on you and premium subscriptions in order to make sure that we can keep the lights on here. It's the only possible way now that we've seen how exactly the YouTube regime is handling this show and really handling the news, honestly. I mean, we just see these crazy tactics of like demonetization, then 24 hours later, by that time, it really doesn't matter. We rely on your guys' support 100%. So link is there in the description. We've got all sorts of premium benefits and all of that, but really we just rely on you and your guys' support in order to keep doing the show.
Couple notes.
Yes,
Number one,
programming note.
We know Chris Cuomo got Me Too'd, and we are going to talk about that. It was a busy show day, but we've got a video for that we'll post tomorrow, so look for that. As a corollary, show schedule is a little bit different this week. There was a bit of a studio conflict. So normally we do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. This week we're doing Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. So tomorrow you'll get your Chris Cuomo Me Too content that you crave, but not a full show. We'll be back with a full show on Wednesday, on Thursday, and onward. So there you go. Love you guys. Have a great day. We will see you back here for that segment tomorrow and full show on Wednesday. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.